Welcome to the Retirement Made Easy podcast, a show created to be your go-to source for straightforward retirement advice. Best of all, it is presented in a language that you can understand. Here's your host, certified financial planner, Greg Gonzalez.
Hey, welcome to the Retirement Made Easy podcast. I'm Greg Gonzalez. Thanks for joining me today. This is episode number 215. Today's episode will have a lot of good information, a lot of good questions that were submitted from you, the listeners. So the second half of the show, we are going to dive and take a deep dive into all those questions, all of your listener questions that you submit through retirestrongfa.com. Link in the show notes if you have questions. But we have collected all those. They've been piling up, and we've kind of gotten a little behind. So the second half of the show, it's going to be like rapid fire. We'll try to get through as many of those as we possibly can. First segment of the show, what we see when somebody approaches retirement and decides to retire. There are three mistakes that are the most common mistakes that we see over and over again. Now, of course, I'm not saying that every new retiree makes all three of these mistakes, but they're just kind of the most common mistakes that we see. Someone may make one of the three mistakes or two of the three mistakes, but I think it's important to know the implications of all three of these mistakes and also to realize what people are doing wrong so you can do your retirement planning right to set yourself up for success. So that's going to be today's show. It should be a great conversation today, and I can't wait to get started. A couple call outs for those new listeners, and we've got a ton of new listeners for Retirement Made Easy. Check out our website, retirestrongfa.com. Underneath the resources tab, you can download all of our free resources, like my retirement secret sauce, the tax guide, our 2026 market outlook is in there, women's guide to retirement, tax guide for 2026 is on there. So a lot of things to check out. All of it's free. And then for those people that are getting close to retirement, getting serious about retirement, maybe you're interviewing different retirement planners because you want to get retirement right and you want somebody who specializes in working with people just like you. I would encourage you on our website, there's a button called Get Started at the top right corner. We'd love to have a conversation with you. Simply fill out the form, and Cheryl, our client relationship manager, will get started to have a phone conversation to see if we would be a good fit to work with you. So check out the link in the show notes. It goes right to our website where you can find not only the free resources, but also the Get Started button to fill out the form. All right, let's jump into today's episode. All right, I wanted to kick off this episode talking about the three most common mistakes that we see someone, let's say, make in the first 6 months of retirement. I think this is going to be eye-opening, is going to be helpful for you as you plan your own retirement. Maybe you're within a year, maybe you're 2 years or 3 years out. But I think avoiding these most common mistakes that we see at Retire Strong, that's going to be a great way to set yourself up for success. The first thing that we see, the first common mistake is dialing in your spending once you're retired. Think about it. Every day is a Saturday. You retire, let's say on Friday. Then the next day is Saturday. The next day is Sunday. Come Monday morning, now it's a Saturday. And Tuesday is a Saturday. You're retired. And every day is a Saturday. And I don't know about you, but in my household, we do most of our spending on the weekends. So thinking, okay, when every day is a Saturday, what are my spending habits going to look like? So we see a lot of people, once they retire, spend more than they had anticipated or they had planned. And they say, gosh, I don't know why I'm spending so much money. It's because you don't have a career to go to 8 to 5, Monday through Friday. And that's 40 hours a week that you could be possibly spending money. And another component to this entry into retirement is some people will treat themselves to a retirement trip or vacation. And by the way, I had a client say, now that we're retired, we don't go on vacation anymore. We simply go on trips. When we were working, we would go on vacation. I thought that was pretty eye-opening. It was a different way of looking at things, but he's certainly right. When you're working, you've got a limited number of vacation days. And hey, if you're going on a vacation, you've got to be back in X number of days, and you've got X amount of vacation days or PTO, paid time off days for the entire year. And you got to kind of plan those. When you're retired, you can simply go on trips. But the other thing that goes into this is when you start retirement, you got all these things that you want to do. There's a lot of people that maybe they have home improvement projects, so there's money that's being spent on those. Maybe it was a trip or a vacation, as we talked about, there's money going out for that. Maybe you want to replace things in your home, or maybe it's a vehicle upgrade. It could be buying an RV or a camper. It could be spending extra time with grandkids and family, and that may come with extra expenses, taking them out to lunch or whatever the case may be. That's number one. That is the number one mistake that we see people as they enter retirement. They're spending more than they had planned. It might be extra Amazon purchases, which is very, very common. So the idea of starting retirement with your spending way, way off target and you're spending more than you had planned on, there are implications of that. In other words, it's going to throw your retirement income strategy off. So meaning if you were thinking of taking X amount of dollars of withdrawals every month starting in retirement, and now you have to dip in for more and more and more money, there's a couple different implications there. Number one, it's going to throw your tax strategy off. It would likely cause more taxes that would accompany those extra withdrawals to pay for all the excess spending, but also it kind of squeezes your retirement plan. In other words, if your retirement savings, all your investment accounts, they were not set up to provide this extra income, it's going to put a lot of pressure on them. And if your investment accounts, your retirement savings accounts cannot keep up with that extra spending, it can set you back. And on the last episode 213, I mentioned this. I mentioned a story where a client said that as they approach retirement next year, they plan on intentionally adjusting their spending. Because while they're working, they've got a lot of discretionary income. If they spend an extra $1,000 or $2,000 a month on items, they don't really need, it's not a big deal. They don't have to put that spending on credit cards or anything like that because they have such high incomes way above their expenses. Turn the page into retirement where they're going to have to intentionally adjust was the terminology that he used, saying, hey, we're on more of a fixed income here, a scenario where we're taking monthly withdrawals, maybe out of our retirement savings. We might have Social Security checks, maybe pension checks coming in. Retirement is going to require them to live on more of a budget, if you will, or a strict income plan with some flexibility. And by that flexibility, a lot of people will include like a miscellaneous spending. This is something I highly, highly recommend. So this is an extra expense in your monthly budget that we're going to call miscellaneous, and it allows you to spend on the extra things on a month-to-month basis that you don't have to feel guilty for spending. And let me give you an example. I went to a World Cup game. I was very, very blessed to go to a World Cup game in Kansas City here just this past weekend. And the parking for this event was $225 at Arrowhead Stadium in Kansas City. $225 to park our vehicle. Now, that was a big I was like stunned that it would cost that much money to park. Fortunately, I was able to share that expense because we carpooled. But that's a perfect example. If I was retired, I would want to, okay, where is this money going to come from? And how is it allocated or accounted for in my budget? It's a miscellaneous category. So that might be $500, $1,000, or $2,000, depending on your situation. But I would highly recommend that for those incidentals. So summarizing here, mistake number one is not adjusting our spending or spending too much really in those early years of retirement. It might be with helping children or grandchildren, remodeling homes, buying RVs, traveling extensively, just things like that where extra expenses are more than we had planned on. And why this is such a big deal, why this is such a big risk is I will argue, and there's a lot of statistical evidence, there's a lot of studies on this, that those first 5 years of a retirement are absolutely crucial to your long-term success. In other words, just to paint the picture, if you went into retirement and let's say you went into a recession And so let's say your investments, your retirement savings accounts were way, way down in those first 5 years of retirement, or your spending was double what you had planned on, or maybe it's 50% higher than you had anticipated. The first 5 years of retirement, these are such crucial years for things to go right because it really, really sets the pace for the next 30 years. Your long-term success in retirement is predicated on those first 5 years of retirement going well. And we hear about people that maybe retired in 2006 or 2007, and immediately we went into the financial crisis of 2008 and 2009, and their retirement savings were cut in half, and they ended up having to go back to work. Their retirement plan was completely derailed because of an event that happened in the first stages of retirement, those first years. But in my eyes, it doesn't have to be a financial collapse or a crash in the stock market. It could be things like an excess spending, like, our spending was way, way out of hand in those first few years of retirement, and that kind of derailed us. Now, I'm not saying that it's not okay to enjoy yourself and spend in those first few years of retirement. Those are the go-go years. But as long as you stick to what you had planned on spending, the mistake here is kind of going overboard with spending. That's what I'm trying to get across here. So stick to your game plan in those first couple of years of retirement. And it's okay to give yourself some grace as far as miscellaneous spending, because guess what? If you account for miscellaneous spending and come to find out you don't end up needing that money or spending that money, you're going to be just fine because you have given yourself that cushion to spend if you needed to. I had a client once that said, I'd rather get down the road and have it and not need it than to need it and not have it. Boy, I thought that was a great line. So that's mistake number one. Mistake number two is in regards to ignoring taxes or the tax implications, your tax bill once you're retired. And this is a biggie. We talk about this on the podcast all the time, that retirement does not mean that your taxes disappear. A lot of people are shocked that most people will pay federal income taxes on their Social Security benefits. We've talked about that on this podcast a lot, that provisional income is the method that they determine how much taxes you will pay on your Social Security benefits. If you want to learn more about provisional income, there'll be a link in the show notes. But essentially, for a married couple filing jointly, if half of your Social Security plus your other income is greater than $44,000, 85%, up to 85% of your Social Security checks will be taxable. And that $44,000, when it was produced and it came out in the 90s, in fact, it was 1993 when Congress came out with this provisional income at $44,000 of the peak at that time. And to not index with that with inflation, here we are, 33 years later, and it's still $44,000 is the provisional income cap. That is the equivalent to someone saying in 1993, telling their boss, hey, you can pay me $44,000 right now. You never have to give me a raise or give me any more money. We'll just stick with $44,000. I think that is very, very short-sighted thinking, or at least it was back then. And we continue to be impacted here, 33 years later. So taxes are not going to go away in retirement, but with proper planning, we can have a material impact on how much taxes we pay throughout our retirement. And I think when you get into excess spending, like mistake number one, you kind of throw your tax strategy out the window, because someone might say, hey, I need another $20,000 and I'll just rob that from my 401k. And that all sounds good until you got to factor in, okay, $20,000 is the net amount. How much are we actually going to withdraw from the 401k on a gross amount? It might be $29,000. We withhold $9,000 for taxes, and then we're left with $20,000 in our pocket. In addition to that, there might be extra taxes. It might throw us into another tax bracket. It might cause us to pay the Medicare surcharge, which is known as IRMA. And if you're married filing jointly, guess what? Both of you are going to have to pay that IRMA. And if you're not familiar with what IRMA is, it stands for Income Related Monthly Adjustment Amount. It basically means your Medicare is going to be more expensive due to your income. And there's other people that just think, okay, I needed the $20,000, I needed the 20 grand, but now the cost of that is I've got $29,000 inside of my 401k that's no longer there and no longer has the potential to grow and compound. And so that was the real cost. But circling back to the overall mistake here that people make is just ignoring taxes and even having taxes as an afterthought in retirement instead of taking more of a proactive approach and saying, I can control with a little planning here. I can control how much taxes I'm going to pay in retirement. And there's a quote that I love that says, planning is bringing the future into the present so you can do something about it right now. And I think taxes in general, just avoiding them or acting like, you're helpless, you have no control, there's no ability to kind of manage taxes. I think that's a big downfall of a lot of people. And if we take it a step further in how specifically kind of a proactive approach and smart tax planning can save you tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars throughout your retired lifetime, when it comes to like required minimum distributions. So there comes an age, for example, if you're born 1960 or after, where required minimum distributions will come into play if you live until 75. That's the year in which you have to begin those. But you have the ability to plan ahead, knowing that those are coming, that, okay, yeah, you're not 75 today, but you will be at some point in the future if you live long enough. And then also looking at, okay, the taxation of your Social Security benefits, the amount of capital gains taxes that you might pay. We talked about IRMA, surcharges, and really that's an extra tax if you boil it down. And managing those realized capital gains and maybe IRA and 401k withdrawals, Roth conversions. And then last but not least, maybe qualified charitable distributions or setting up donor advised funds for those people that are charitably inclined. That's a whole different discussion that I guess combines your charitable giving goals that you might have with benefiting yourself from a tax standpoint the most you can. So mistake number 2, ignoring taxes in retirement, or I guess just failing to plan from a tax standpoint. And mistake number 3, I think we see this, a lot of people like enter retirement kind of willy-nilly. They just say, okay, I'm told I got enough saved. I'll start my Social Security right away. I'll kind of just figure this out as I go. And when I think of the people that are, maybe they have that personality where they're carefree and they're easygoing and they don't worry about things. Well, I would encourage you to not be one of those people. Don't go into retirement thinking that this is going to be a scavenger hunt, that you'll find things here and there, may not be today, may not be tomorrow, but eventually it'll all work itself out. In my opinion, and this is based on watching hundreds of people retire, the ones that go into retirement with an income plan of when their money is going to show up, how much it is, and where it's coming from. And that might change over time. For example, you may retire and delay your Social Security check for a couple of years. Maybe you'll have part-time income coming in, and that causes you to delay your Social Security benefit. But a written plan of, okay, where is my money coming from every month to live on to replace my paycheck? And how am I going to handle taxes in retirement? Am I going to withhold taxes? Am I going to do quarterly estimated payments? Is this income plan, these monthly withdrawals, how are they going to adjust over time if something happens like, hey, maybe your part-time income goes away, or maybe there's a big market downturn? How is your income going to adjust in that time? Which accounts do you withdraw from first? Are there any required distributions? Like maybe you inherited an IRA or a 401k and there's required distributions, or when your required minimum distributions kick in later on in retirement. And then last but not least, if you did need to take a big lump sum withdrawal, $20,000, $50,000, $75,000, where would it come from? Is the money liquid? What are the tax implications? And think to yourself as you're approaching retirement, are there any big expenses that I can see as I'm looking over the landscape of my life? Are there any big expenses that might pop up? Replacing a roof, replacing an HVAC system, a new vehicle purchase, a big medical expense. Maybe it's a dental surgery. Can you anticipate any of these big expenses on the horizon? And if so, when would you expect them to pop up? And why do I ask that? That's going to impact your income plan. Just knowing that, hey, in the next 3 to 24 months, we're going to have to replace our roof. Where's that money going to come from? And I say this just coming out of experience of doing this so many years, helping people plan for a successful retirement. We find that a lot of these big expenses that do pop up, and especially when you're retired, you're going to handle it differently than when you were working, certainly. But a lot of them, and not all the time, right? But I would say the vast majority of these big expenses that you'll face, you could have predicted them, or at least you wouldn't have been shocked that your HVAC system went out, knowing that it was on its last leg. Now, getting back to income in retirement specifically, we had someone that reached out to us, a podcast listener, not too long ago, that her main question was, how much of my paycheck am I going to be able to replace in retirement? And how long will I be able to replace that? Meaning, how long will my money last? I just thought it was a really, really good way of thinking, of summarizing a complex subject like retirement planning and boiling it down to, okay, I know what my take-home pay is now. I'm debt-free. How much of my paycheck will I be able to replace with the resources that I have? And how long will that income or my money last? I just thought that was a very, very simple way to look at retirement income planning. So I hope those top 3 mistakes that we see people make once they retire have been helpful, have been enlightening. And the last one, which is coming up with an income plan of where that money is going to come from. Without a plan, you don't know how long that income is going to be there for you, how long your money is going to last. And ultimately, the big risk is it could end up forcing them to cut their spending down the road in retirement when it's going to be very difficult to cut your spending maybe 20 years from now. Just look what inflation has done these past couple of years. If that continues for the next 20 years, gosh, what are our utility bills going to be like? Our grocery bill is already expensive enough today. Imagine what it's going to be 20 years from now. And you might not be able to cut expenses too much 20 years from now just because everyday living expenses continue to go up and up. And a good example of this is if you're spending $60,000 after tax today, at a 3% inflation, in 20 years, you'll need $109,000 of after-tax income at just 3% inflation. It'll go from $60,000 to $109,000 a year. So if you retire at 62 on $60,000 a year, spending at 82, it's going to cost that same 60,000 turns into 109,000. That's a big jump. So in theory, it's easy to say, oh, when I get older, I'll cut some of my expenses. But in practice, in reality, you might not save too much, like in a monthly dollar figure as far as your budget, just because the expenses you're keeping just have gone up so dramatically. But as a client of mine said, well, we'll just grow a bigger garden. Okay, let's jump into some listener questions. Going to get through as many of these as we possibly can. And again, submit these at our website, retirestrongfa.com, link in the show notes. But the first listener said they're aware that at under full retirement age, if you collect your Social Security benefit under full retirement age, which this person was born in 1960, so their full retirement age is 67, they're planning on collecting their Social Security benefit early, but their spouse is still working and is way above that income limit. And they are concerned that their spouse's income will reduce or penalize their Social Security benefit check. I've got good news. Your spouse's income, even though you file a married filing jointly tax return, your spouse's income will not impact your Social Security benefit. It will not penalize your Social Security benefit if you're collecting under your full retirement age. So have no fear. Tell your spouse they can work and make as much money as they want. It will not impact or penalize your benefit. So I hope that helps. The next question was submitted from a listener that said they're hearing mixed reports. Some people say once you start your Social Security benefit, there's no stopping it. And other people have told her that you can stop it or suspend it in the future. Can I explain? Yes, I would be happy to. So the advice that sometimes we get from other people is worth about as much as we pay for it. So if you're hearing different things from both sides of the spectrum, it is kind of better to maybe ask an expert or someone that's, in the field. So if you're under your full retirement age when you start your benefit, meaning your full retirement age, you got to figure out when that is. Born 1960 or after, it's age 67. Let's say you start your benefit at 62. Right away at 62, you get your first benefit payment at 62 in 1 month. You have 12 months to stop your benefit, and then what it would require is that you pay back the benefits that you received. And it would be like it never happened because you're stopping your benefit, paying back what was paid to you, and it's kind of a redo at that point. And again, you have 12 months to do so. So it's a short window. Now, once you miss that window, upon turning full retirement age, which again, we're assuming someone's born 1960 or after, is age 67, you could go to Social Security and say, hey, I want to suspend my benefit now. You wouldn't have to pay any money back. And then you would start receiving deferral credits every single month that you delayed your Social Security benefit. And between full retirement age, which is 67, and it kind of caps out at age 70, of course, that's the maximum age. So for those 3 years, you would get deferral credits, and it's 8% simple interest per year. So hypothetically, let's say you were receiving your benefit at 62, and you continued all the way through age 67, which is your full retirement age. You suspended the benefit, and then you let it accrue deferral credits. It would grow 8% simple interest per year. So that's 24% between 67 and age 70. And then you restarted your benefit at age 70. It would be at least 24% higher than when you had suspended it, not including the cost of living adjustments that had occurred during those short 3 years. And some people say, well, why would anybody ever suspend their Social Security benefit or stop their Social Security benefit? A couple different reasons. Some people inherit money and they no longer need the Social Security income, and they would rather see it grow and get those deferral credits until they might need it later on in life, and it'll be a bigger amount of money for the rest of their life. Other people, maybe they retired, let's say at 62 or 64, it really doesn't matter. They started their Social Security benefit, started receiving the income, and then maybe they had a job opportunity that popped up that they couldn't say no to. And they said, okay, well, I make too much money. I'm above the Social Security income limit under my full retirement age, which in 2026 is $24,480 per year. So every $2 that you make, that you earn above that limit, they reduce your Social Security benefit by $1. And let's say this person's job opportunity, they're going to make well above that $24,480 earnings limit, so that they say, okay, I'm going to stop my Social Security benefit. So typically it's going to be a change in financial circumstances that would cause somebody to stop or suspend their Social Security benefit. Maybe they needed that Social Security income in the early years of retirement, and then, something happened and they say, okay, in the later years, I'm going to reduce my spending, maybe suspend my Social Security benefit where I get that 8% deferral credit per year. That might be attractive to some people. because Social Security is a lifetime income stream that has an inflation adjustment. Most private pensions will not have a pension with a cost of living adjustment or an inflation adjustment annually. You just won't find them. So the next question comes from a listener that said, please don't use my name, but talk to me like I'm a sixth grader. How would you explain a Roth conversion? What are the benefits? What are the disadvantages of the Roth conversion? And how might it be beneficial to me? Okay, it's a great question. And I want this podcast to be anonymous. I'll never use names. I don't want people to be afraid to ask questions, especially if they think, oh, this is something I should know, so I won't ask it. That's the opposite of what I want. So a Roth conversion, so let's say you have a traditional IRA or maybe a what we call pre-tax 401k. So the money, if you were to take a withdrawal from the IRA or the pre-tax 401k, with that withdrawal, you're going to pay taxes. You're going to pay federal and state income taxes if it applies to you. It's going to be taxed as ordinary income. And then you receive the withdrawal in your checking or savings account, and you can choose to pay taxes or not. Sometimes, most of the time, 401ks will have a mandatory tax withholding, but you are taxed upon withdrawal is the concept out of the pre-tax 401k or the traditional IRA, which you got a tax deduction when you put the money in. Now, when you pull the money out, then you pay taxes, ordinary income taxes. Now, at some point, you're going to have what's called required minimum distributions that you need to be aware of. So if you're born 1960 or after, that required minimum distribution age is age 75. That is the year, starting at age 75, when you will have mandatory annual requirements to take distributions out of that 401k or traditional IRA. Why does the IRS make us do that? They want their tax dollars. They want their tax revenues. And all that money inside of your 401k or traditional IRA has yet to be taxed. So what some people do is they do what's called a Roth conversion, is they take money out of their pre-tax 401k or pre-tax traditional IRA, pay the taxes, and then it goes into their Roth IRA or Roth 401k. And what's the benefit of the Roth 401k, the Roth IRA? Once the money's in there, it has the potential to grow tax-free. All of the future growth, all of the future dividends, all the interest, that account is essentially what's known as tax-free territory. The other thing that Roth 401ks and Roth IRAs, a unique feature of them, is they don't have those required minimum distributions. You're not ever forced to take money out of your own Roth 401k or Roth IRA. If you want that money to keep growing tax-free, then you can just leave it alone if you want. Now, the disadvantage, of course, is, okay, doing the Roth conversion, you have to pay taxes on the amount that you convert. So meaning if you take $10,000 out of your IRA, do a conversion, and it moves over to your Roth IRA, taxes are due, and you will receive a 1099 showing that the conversion was done and that it's taxable. It's taxed as ordinary income, just the same as if you would have taken the withdrawal and put the money in your checking account. Now, with Roth IRAs, there's a 5-year rule that you need to be aware of. So rule of thumb, get a Roth IRA opened and funded. If you plan on having one, get it funded as soon as possible. I'll include a link in the show notes where you can read more about the 5-year rule and satisfying that, because that is something that you need to be aware of. Now, there's a long list of benefits to the Roth IRAs. Having an account that is growing tax-free for the rest of your life, and even legacy advantages, meaning you can leave that Roth IRA to family or children or loved ones, and it continues to grow tax-free after your death. So just like life insurance proceeds are tax-free when you receive them, the same thing with Roth IRAs. When you inherit a Roth IRA, it is a tax-free account that you inherit. As opposed to if you inherit an IRA or a traditional pre-tax Roth IRA, that comes along with the taxes that are going to be due on that money. So yeah, you inherit the account, but it may be only worth 80 cents on the dollar or 70 cents on the dollar. As an example, just due to the taxes that you'll have to pay on the withdrawals from that account that you inherited. So circling back to this listener's question, I hope I explained what a Roth conversion is, taking money out of the traditional IRA or pre-tax 401k, paying the taxes, and then the money moves to your Roth account, whether it's a Roth IRA or 401k. Now, why do people do it in practice? Well, maybe they're trying to top out a tax bracket. For example, maybe they have $10,000 left in their 12% tax bracket, and they say, okay, we'll fill that up by doing a Roth conversion. Other people, they notice that, hey, we're over 40 trillion in debt as a country at this point, and they might believe that taxes are probably headed up in the future at some point. That's the only way we're going to be able to get out of this mess, is higher taxes in the future. So some people will say, gosh, I'd rather do the Roth conversion now, bite the bullet, pay the taxes now while taxes are somewhat reasonable, knowing that probably they're going to be headed up in the future. And also kind of saying, okay, that Roth account, I'll be able to take withdrawals down the road from it, and all of those withdrawals will be tax-free. And if you ask, I think if you did a poll of all people out there that had retirement accounts or investment accounts, and you said, which one is your favorite account? If you had to pick only one, which is your favorite? I think most people would say right away, Roth IRA, Roth 401k, because that money is growing tax-free, and it'll grow tax-free the rest of my life. It can never be taxed again. There's nothing better than tax-free growth. That's my favorite account, the Roth account. So that's my long-winded answer of what a Roth conversion is, why it's valuable, the cost. Okay, we got to pay taxes now on the front end so that, down the road, it can grow tax-free and hopefully compound and really balloon into a great account that we can tap into tax-free if we need to. Next question is about pensions and how to claim the best pension option, assuming a pension lump sum option is not available. This person writes in saying that the single life option pays the highest, but that would mean if they passed away, their spouse would get nothing, and that seems risky. What about the other options? What typically do people do if they're married in trying to pick the best pension option? So this is a great question. To kind of explain what the lump sum option is, that this person's saying that the lump sum option isn't available. What some people do, especially if your pension is underfunded, if a lump sum option is available, some people will go with that option where they can roll over the lump sum benefit. Let's say it's $300,000 and put it in their 401k or their rollover IRA. And therefore, that $300,000 is not taxed. It's only taxed upon withdrawal in retirement. Now, the benefit of that is you are in charge and in control of how that money is invested and how the withdrawals are taken. And for people that maybe are not the best with money, they don't have professional management, maybe they're not disciplined, typically that is not the way to go because again, you're putting yourself in charge of $300,000 or whatever that lump sum benefit is. That's a big, big job. You got to make sure that that $300,000 is invested wisely, withdrawals are taken appropriately, and it is prudently cared for. And some people are just not the best ones to be left in charge of that amount of money. But the benefit of doing the lump sum option, or one of the benefits, is that you don't run the risk of something happening to the pension fund itself. In other words, if it became insolvent or went belly up, your pension check may be reduced dramatically or may stop. And there's a lot of pension funds that ran into financial issues and they had to, like I said, drastically reduce their retired participants' pensions that they're receiving every single month. They found themselves in financial trouble, and there wasn't enough money in the pension fund to sustain sending those pension checks every month. But let's assume the lump sum option is not available to you. So, okay, then what we got to do is we got to pick the option. What different pension option do I want? What payout? So, for example, the single life, and if you're married, your spouse would have to sign off on this and agree to this. It is always going to be the highest pension amount. So it might be $3,000 a month for single life. But if you predeceased your spouse, it would stop. Your spouse would get nothing. So if you're going to do that, if you're going to go that route, the single life where it's the highest, maybe it's a good idea to have a life insurance policy or at least other resources available that if you did predecease your spouse, that something is there for them because it would stop at that point. There's what's called a 10-year certain, maybe a 15-year certain, a 5-year certain. All that means is you're going to collect your pension, and if you were to get hit by a bus, let's say 6 months after you retire, it would at least pay out to your beneficiaries for a period certain, either 5 years, 10 years, or 15 years. At that point, it would stop. So some people, in lieu of taking the single life option, will go with a period certain. Maybe they are single, so they don't have a spouse, and they'll do maybe a 10-year period certain. What that means is, again, if they were to pass away in the first year of retirement, for the next 9 years, it would pay out to whoever they named as a beneficiary. It might be a sibling, a family member, a friend, but at least somebody's getting 10 years worth of pension payments. Again, you will commonly see 5-year certain, 10-year certain, or 15-year certain. And lastly, there's going to be what's called a joint and survivor option. So if your single life is $3,000 a month, your 100% joint and survivor may be $2,600 a month, but it pays monthly for as long as you are living or your spouse is living, $2,600 a month. That is always the most conservative option because it pays out for 2 lives. We don't have an expiration date on our birth certificates, so a lot of people just like to go with the 100% joint and survivor because it's the most conservative. Typically, there's other options like a 50% survivor option. So what that might look like is instead of $2,600 a month, you would get $2,800 a month while you're living, and then upon your passing, your spouse would get half of that, or $1,400 a month for the rest of their life. Now you can compare like break-even analysis of the different options and to run what-if scenarios. If you as the spouse, the participant, did predecease your spouse, how would that leave them the rest of their life in retirement? And really, would there be enough resources to sustain them for as long as they may live? So a lot of times, choosing that pension option is really to protect the surviving spouse. Maybe it's the younger, healthier spouse for as long as they may live, because your spouse does have rights to that pension too. And the last thing I'll mention is that both spouses have to agree. You want to feel good about the option that you're both choosing together. And when you elect your pension benefit option, your spouse's signature will have to be notarized agreeing to that option. So it's very important that you're both on the same page and feel good about the decision. With Social Security, it doesn't work like that. One spouse can claim their benefit, let's say early, and the other spouse may disagree with them doing that. They may say, no, you should be waiting until it's a larger amount. And that might be a big disagreement, but there's nothing the other spouse can do. If you want to claim your benefit, you don't need your spouse's signature or permission when it comes to Social Security. Last question is a really good question. This listener wanted to know how their investments, like their 401k, Roth IRAs, different accounts, should be invested in retirement versus when they were working. And should they continue to invest the same? Well, without knowing your exact situation, I can't tell you one way or the other. What I can tell you is that your goals while you're working and you're saving for retirement, maybe getting the company match in a 401k, you're looking for growth. Most people are looking for growth of their money. They're not looking to take withdrawals while they're working because they're living on their salary. Flip the switch, now we're in retirement and we start to spend out of our 401k and other retirement accounts. We're no longer saving. We want more income. I mean, yeah, we want the growth too, But income, we want distributions. We want to be able to take withdrawals to supplement our other income, like Social Security, maybe pension income, maybe part-time income. So withdrawals, a suitable withdrawal strategy, it might be dividends, it might be interest income that you're spending. That becomes the primary goal in retirement. So if our goals are different, the objectives that we have with our money are different once we retire, then it just makes sense that we invest our money differently in retirement than when we were working. Now, at our firm, we believe in the Retire Strong bucket strategy. And I'll put a link in the show notes where you can listen to the episodes where we talk about the bucket strategy in detail and why the Retire Strong bucket strategy makes sense for our firm. We believe in it. Our clients seem to really gravitate towards it and easily understand how their money is working so that they can get the income in retirement that they're looking for. And I think that's the key component to everything is however you invest your money in retirement, make sure you understand how your money is invested and why, especially when you begin to take those important withdrawals. So I hope this episode of the Retirement Made Easy podcast has been helpful. I'll see you next time. And remember, always dream big.
Content in this material is for general information only and not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. The content in this material does not necessarily reflect the views of LPL Financial. This is a hypothetical example and is not representative of any specific situation. Your results will vary. The hypothetical rates of return used do not reflect the deduction of fees and charges inherent to investing. The opinions voiced in this material are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine which investments might be appropriate for you, please consult your attorney, tax advisor, or financial planner prior to investing. This is a hypothetical example and is not representative of any specific investment. Your results may vary. All performance referenced is historical and is no guarantee of future results. All indices mentioned are unmanaged and may not be invested into directly. There is no guarantee that a diversified portfolio will enhance your overall returns or outperform a non-diversified portfolio. Diversification does not protect completely against market risk. All investing involves risk, including loss of principal. No strategy assures success or protects against loss. Securities and advisory services offered through LPL Financial, a registered investment advisor, member FINRA SIPC. Traditional IRA account owners have considerations to make before performing a Roth IRA conversion. These primarily include income tax consequences on the converted amount in the year of conversion, withdrawal limitations from a Roth IRA, and income limitations for future contributions to a Roth IRA. In addition, if you are required to take a required minimum distribution, RMD, in the year you convert, you must do so before converting to a Roth IRA. This information is not intended to be a substitute for specific individualized tax advice. We suggest that you discuss your specific tax issues with a qualified tax advisor. Fixed and variable annuities are suitable for long-term investing, such as retirement investing. Gains from tax-deferred investments are taxed as ordinary income upon withdrawal. Guarantees are based on the claims-paying ability of the issuing company. Withdrawals made prior to age 59.5 are subject to a 10% IRS penalty tax, and surrender charges may apply. Variable annuities are subject to market risk and may lose value. Riders are additional guarantee options that are available to an annuity or life insurance contract holder. While some riders are part of an existing contract, many others may carry additional fees, charges, and restrictions, and the policyholder should review their contract before purchasing. Traditional IRA account owners have considerations to make before performing a Roth IRA conversion. These primarily include income tax consequences on the converted amount in the year of conversion, withdrawal limitations from a Roth IRA, and income limitations for future contributions to a Roth IRA. In addition, if you are required to take a required minimum distribution, RMD, in the year you convert, you must do so before converting to a Roth IRA. This information is not intended to be a substitute for specific individualized tax advice. We suggest that you discuss your specific tax issues with a qualified tax advisor. Retire Strong Financial Advisors and LPL Financial are not endorsed by or affiliated with the United States Social Security Administration or any government agency. Retire Strong Financial Advisors and LPL Financial are not endorsed by or affiliated with the U.S. Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services or any government agency.
Thank you for listening to the show today. Check us out at our website, retirementmadeeasypodcast.com. And if you want some help from Greg, submit your questions at the bottom of the page or sign up for a 30-minute retirement coaching session with Greg. We'll see you next week.